I would like to welcome everybody out to tonight's City Council General Meeting for Wednesday, October 24th. To get started, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and flag ceremony given by Troop 1963. Tyson Russell will lead that for us. So Tyson wants to come up.
A long way around.
Okay. Color guard attention. Will the audience please rise? Scout salute. Those of you who are not in uniform, please place your right hand over your heart. Color guard forward march. Color guard post the colors. Will the audience please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Two. Color guard dismissed. The audience may be seated.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate our youth organizations when they come and participate in our meetings. So thank you very much to those that participated today. Any conflict of interest disclosures from the council for tonight? No. No? Okay. Any comments or recognitions from the council tonight? So I just wanted to state that I attended the Herriman Howl that we had recently, and once again, it was a fantastic event. I thought staff did an amazing job. Particularly enjoyed the different displays set up by the different departments with our various skeleton friends. But it was well attended, and once again, I think it was a successful event. So I want to recognize staff for their efforts on that. So we will move into our public comment section of our meeting. Audience members may bring any item to the mayor and council's attention. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes. State law does prohibit the council from acting on items that do not appear on the agenda. So if you would like to address the council, now would be your opportunity. Please come up to the mic and do so at this time. All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and close the public comment. Next, are there any council, board, or committee reports?
Mayor, I'll just give a quick report. I sit as a representative of Herriman City on the South Valley Sewer Board. Our monthly meeting was held just yesterday morning. The major things of note for the South Valley Sewer District is they are on a calendar budget year, so we are working through our budget process currently. This is an organization that, as I've become more familiar with it since being appointed to that board, that I've been very impressed with the manner in which they manage their budget, the oversight and management of that administrative team down there. There's a tremendous amount of leadership there. Craig White has oversaw that organization for some time, and he does an outstanding job. And they are very fiscally sound, but obviously every time that they go through the budget process, there's always items of note and possible increases there. Just so everyone is aware, their hearing on the budget will be held on November the 13th. So anyone that's interested in being able to be there to comment on that, that'll be the day for that. They, again, have been very fiscally responsible, but there are a couple of items of note in there. One is where they dispose of the biohazards that come out of the sewage treatment plant there. There's some concern this year that the current site that is being used will no longer be accessible to them, which causes some concern over the increase in both gas trucking fees and tipping fees as far as where they go. So we are anticipating those changes, so there is some increases within the budget, but again, that falls within, they've made some cuts other areas to help adjust for those. Again, a very fiscally sound organization, but wanted everyone to be aware. The other topic that has been discussed there for some time and is continuing to be discussed is there any feasible way to, use the discharged water that comes out of the treatment plant and be able to reclaim that back into a secondary system? That's something that's been discussed for a long time. The major issue that we have to deal with there is the dissolved solids, the amount of those within that discharged water, and that primarily comes from the use of water softeners. That's one of the huge ones that is difficult for us to deal with, is the salt content. We're all aware that the water that's out in this area and provided to us is one that's a little bit harder in nature. But with that, I think it has become accustomed and acceptable that everyone puts in a water softener, which is fine. That's a choice that's made, but we probably utilize those systems, which creates issues. We put millions of gallons into the Jordan River every day, honestly, in the water that comes out of that, if we found better ways and better uses of ways to treat the hard water and the other things we use on the consumer side of it, that we might be able to reclaim that water back into our secondary systems. So just a point of education, but something we continue to focus on, but something we're going to need the public's help if we're actually going to solve that issue. Obviously, we live in a dry state. We live in an area where we always have concerns with water, so finding ways to be able to reuse that and benefit us is of great interest to us, and we should be focused on that, but it's going to take everybody's help in order to accomplish that. So that's my report from the Sewer Board.
Mayor, I'll make a quick report. So we did have a meeting of the United Fire Authority, and all is well. I just like to always let people know that they had a busy fire season. They took care of everything that they needed to do, and it is a stellar organization. We're very pleased with the work that they have done, and so just want to express our appreciation for that. Secondarily, we met with the Utah League of Cities and Towns, the board on which I sit, and I just want to in principle talk about what they're doing there. Very often, well, I think the underlying principle is this: the government closest to the people governs best. And what we're seeing more of is legislature enacting bills that are negatively impacting cities or making it challenging for us to be your voice in the matters in which you're directly impacted. And it's often called local control. In recent years, local control has been seen as a negative, when in fact, as we said, we believe that you elect us and we're close to you and the city, and so we feel like we're in the best position to make that decision. Oftentimes there's maybe a bad actor city that is doing something that is not appropriate, and then a bill is put forward and passed that not only addresses this one isolated anomaly problem, but now all of the cities are subject to additional regulations and oversight that is unnecessary and often very harming. So with that effect, the Utah League of Cities and Towns is undertaking a large-scale campaign to educate the residents, elected officials, certainly our legislators up on the Hill, as to how best we can work together. Of interest to all of us is this density issue and growth that we're going to see in the state. The one thing that we're battling is the legislature wants to make sure that we have room for all the growth. What we're saying, particularly us in the Southwest, is that we don't want all of that growth to come in our boundaries simply because we have land. Then essentially we're being penalized for developing later than cities on the east side, for instance. It's unfair to have all of the density on the west side. So what we don't want to have happen is have the legislature get down into land use planning. So we need to coordinate and work with them, but make sure that land use planning is in fact a local decision that is made here in our community, because we're in the best position to understand what we want our community to be. So I guess I just want to let all of the residents know that your voices are being heard, and the organization that is responsible for bringing that voice of the cities, which is conversely the voice of the people, to our legislators to make sure that land use planning is done accurately and right.
I serve on the Wasatch Front Waste and Recycling Board, and we had our meeting on Monday. We too are going through a budget process, and our budget hearing for the public will be on November 19th at 6 p.m. So if any of you are interested in attending that, it will be on the 19th. We also discussed a proposal by Herriman that Herriman will do the billing for the garbage. We would add that to our water bill, so you would have water and garbage on the same monthly bill. To do that, we would have to enter into an interlocal agreement with Wasatch Front to be able to be allowed to do that. It was presented to the board. Basically, what was presented to the board on Monday was that Herriman would pay for a study done by Zions Bank to understand the financial implications for both entities. So we want to know if it's beneficial to Wasatch Front and whether or not it's beneficial to Herriman, just the pros and cons of those things. So it was the board approved moving forward with the study, not any vote at all on the interlocal agreement, but moving forward with the study to see if that would be in everyone's best interest to allow that to be part of a combined billing rather than receiving two separate billings for those different services.
I'm just happy to report they don't have to sit on a board anymore.
Do you want to give the update as to the decision that the Riverton City Council made last night?
So last night, Riverton City Council did, well, they voted a few months ago, 4 months ago, to give their notice to leave UPD, but they've been negotiating, we'll say, since then. Riverton City last night did give direction to their staff, of 3-2 vote, I believe, to hire their police chief and move forward.
Annual budget review, so just be aware, it's I think it's the smallest part of your taxes that you get for even smaller than what the city gets, so.
That's almost hard to do.
It is almost hard to do. So that's my only update. So we will go ahead and move on then to item 4.1, Rocky Mountain Power Report by, I'm going to say this wrong. I'm not even try. Aline? Or Aline?
Aline.
Aline, okay.
My dad's named Al. I'm Junior. Does that help?
Yes, that does.
Okay. Thank you for giving me a few minutes tonight to address you. I want to just hit some highlights of the service that Rocky Mountain Power provides to Herriman and the participation rate of some of the Herriman residents and businesses in many of our programs. And then I want to give you a heads up about a project that we'll be doing. I want to first thank you for adopting a 20-year franchise just a few months ago. We appreciate that. We have valued the partnership that we have had with Herriman City ever since your incorporation. And you know better than I, but it has been quite a ride to keep up with the growth that has occurred here. And we look forward to continued partnership with you. We serve currently over 10,000 customers in Herriman City. I know your population is, what, 50,000 or so? But our customer count comes in at close, actually, to about 11,000. And last year, we delivered about 144 million kilowatt hours to you. Put that in some perspective, the average residential customer uses something less than about 800 kilowatt hours a month. So that's a lot of juice coming over the wires to you. In a moment, I'll talk about some new infrastructure plans that we have to keep pace with your growth. One of the ways that we partner with Herriman City is to support the wonderful activities that you do in the summer. And I was pleased that this year we were able to boost our sponsorship a little bit higher to participate in the rodeo, the Herriman Town Days, and the Enduro Challenge. And I've just been speaking with Wendy, and we're going to get together tomorrow and explore some opportunities to perhaps provide additional support to you for a holiday event. We're very pleased with the participation rate of Herriman residents and businesses in our renewable energy programs. Our Blue Sky program is a voluntary customer program. You pay about $1.95 per 100 kilowatt hour block per month, and there are 417 Blue Sky participants, and they accounted for about 1.8 million kilowatt hours of renewable energy last year. We have also extended about $21,000 in incentives through our solar incentive program, which is no longer available. In its stead, we built a 20 megawatt solar farm in Millard County. It's called Subscriber Solar, catchy name. You can rely on a utility to come up with something that creative. And we have 52 voluntary customer participants in that program, and according to the subscriptions that they have signed up for, that accounted for almost 500,000 kilowatt hours of solar generation this past year. Within Herriman city limits, we have 764 net metered customers, so that might be, those are customers who have rooftop solar, and their generation amounted to almost 8 million kilowatt hours. Rocky Mountain Power really emphasizes energy efficiency, and we have a whole suite of what we call WattSmart programs. The cleanest, cheapest energy that any of us can buy is energy efficiency. And we can demonstrate to the Public Service Commission that it will cost all of our customers less if we can incent customers to make energy efficiency improvements in their homes and businesses. So last year, we distributed over $130,000 of incentives to customers in Herriman City, and their energy savings were almost 800,000 kilowatt hours, and they saved almost $60,000 in lower power bills.
And that's an ongoing saving that they're going to continue to receive year after year, correct?
Pardon me?
That's an ongoing savings. It's not just a one-time
Yeah,
saving.
that's
They get to see
ongoing.
that ongoing year after year. So just in the first year, they've already made up a good portion of what they're
That's
looking
correct.
at.
And that's where we like to focus our efforts, is on structural changes, not, I mean, yeah, turn off the lights when you leave a room, but behavior is transitory. So we want people to build in energy efficiency. If you're going to replace that air conditioner, make sure you do it with a high efficiency air conditioner. It is no secret to you that growth is galloping ahead. I do. I meet with the engineering department once a month, and I know what kind of pressures the city is dealing with. It has also been a challenge for us. We have seen a substantial uptick in new connects due to all the commercial and residential growth in the area, and this has pushed our facilities to the limit. So to address that growth, we will double the capacity of the Herriman substation that's on 6300 West and about 13400 South by adding a second transformer to that facility and then building out distribution feeders to deliver the energy to customers. Last fall, you may recall that we did a portion of this work between Mountain View and 5600 West along 134 South. And this did give us some reliability improvements while we had to take the time to design the rest of this project and to get long lead materials on order. So this fall and winter, we're going to be doing some additional work on both sides of 134 South between 5400 West and 6400 West, and then of course making the capacity addition inside the substation fence. I wanted to give you a heads up about this. By its very nature, this kind of work is going to cause some disruption and inconvenience, and we will do our very best to limit that to the extent that we can. Please have patience with us while we're making the improvements. But what we'll be doing is rebuilding the existing overhead line on the north side of 134 South, and that will allow us to install a second overhead circuit. We will install an underground circuit on the north side of 134 South, east of the overhead line to 5600 West. We will install an underground circuit on the south side of 134 South from 5600 West to 6400 West. And then, as I said, we will install a second 30 MVA transformer inside the substation along with switchgear and a capacitor bank. If you have any questions, I would be glad to entertain them, but I want to close by saying that I'm responsible for managing the company's relationships in the vast majority of jurisdictions in Salt Lake County. And as I mentioned, I meet with the engineering office once a month. You probably know this, but let me say, you have a first-rate professional staff. Brett and his team do an outstanding job. And I consider Herriman City to be one of the best managed cities that I work with. And I very much value the partnership that we share. Thank you.
We appreciate that feedback. Thank you so very much. All right, we'll move on to item 4.2, Olympia Hills update. Michael Malloy.
I will just briefly, we're going to turn the time over to our consultants on this project. As the council knows, we've had periodic updates from this team. We anticipate having a final report out on their research on the Olympia Hills area, which is outside of city limits. It is part of our annexation declaration in our current general plan. And as we begin our new general plan, we anticipate including a lot of this information in that study in our new general plan. So they have a presentation they would like to present to the council tonight.
Thanks, Michael. Before we get started, I probably ought to also thank Eileen, who's did a fabulous job meeting with us and assuring us that they're prepared to work with whatever you decide to do on Olympia Hills or any of the other proposed developments. Councilwoman Orm, when I was here probably a month ago, a couple of weeks ago, you asked a question about water. And I'm embarrassed. I did not adequately answer your question. We've since met with Jordan Valley Water, and I think we've got a resolution on, I think, most of what you were asking. They've got water, and they can buy additional water. Some of the challenges that they're facing would be how to pay for that additional water. Should new users that require additional water have to pay an extra fee, or should they have to pay an impact fee? Their board is currently evaluating that, and they may make some changes. They aren't willing yet, or they're not ready yet to announce any of those changes. The other important issue was what happens if we have a long-term serious drought and we just don't have the water to meet what they've contracted already to provide. What they've assured us is that everyone that's part of their system, if they have to do cutbacks, those cutbacks will be even across the system. Nothing like first in line, first in time, that there'll be no preferences to anybody. So what I think that really means to a growing community like Herriman, that there's no disincentive to you or your existing residents to have additional annexations and take on additional residents. That doesn't disadvantage you. It frankly doesn't disadvantage any of your neighboring communities either. That if there is a long-term drought and they are forced to reduce water availability, It's across the board. Everybody would be treated absolutely evenly. Does that help?
But Bob, in addition, I apologize if I interrupted, but with that same argument, though, of course, the residents and neighboring communities would have a concern about influx, because even though if there were a drought and you would have to pull back equally, what they would think is that the influx of people is causing, in the midst of a drought, less water. So again, still a concern, and still something that has to be addressed.
I understand.
Even though it would be, you understand what I'm saying, even though it would be administered equally, we would get to that place sooner. Now, again, it doesn't take into effect the reality that the people are simply coming, and that's just the reality of it. But again, it doesn't take away their thinking that this density or this influx of people is going to impact them.
Because we were talking about, I'm sharing a gallon of water with 10 people, but then, wow, now I'm sharing a gallon of water with 100 people. So your percentage of it is much smaller, even if it's cut back equally, the percentages is
You
smaller.
said that much more
We're
clearly
not
than I
talking
did.
about an unlimited resource.
Exactly. And that's always been my concern. And
Which-
thank you for readdressing it.
Which goes back to the original question of, it's not an infinite resource. You said that their response was that they can buy additional water. Where are they buying it from?
Right. It's my understanding that the Colorado River drainage is at 150% allocation. So we're 50% at 150% allocation of a drainage. That's a reality that people have to be aware of. So again, it's a different conversation, but thank you for readdressing it.
Thank you. Now, this first slide on the options to pay for growth, you've seen before, but I think it's important to see it again, and frankly, make sure you note the development agreements. They also are a provision for how things are paid for. We've looked at other areas in what we would consider the southwest part of the valley, but also looking at Lehigh. And these are what we've called other large master plan communities. Jordan Hills Villages, the South Jordan Daybreak, which obviously you're aware of, Highland Park Village, Herriman Olympia Hills, which is proposed, and then down in Lehigh, the Holbrook Farms. All are very, very large planned developments that'll be multi-year and ongoing. And they all have a mix of residences. They have, by their standards, large lot, single-family detached homes. They also have townhomes. They have patio homes, and they have multifamily. Probably similar to the kind of development proposals you're going to be seeing. This is how they look if you look at them on a table. Olympia Hills then was proposing 8,765 residential units. South Jordan Daybreak, 20,000. Lehigh, 28,224. And West Jordan Hills Villages, almost 2,500. The total acreages, I don't need to read those numbers for you. Acres that set aside for residential, these numbers aren't consistently available. But then you look at the dwelling units per acre, Olympia Hills, and I ought to make sure we understand, these are gross acreage numbers. There's no allowance taken out for roads, schools, other public facilities, open space. This is just taking the total number of dwelling units and then dividing them by the total acreage available. Now, so you can see where Daybreak is, Holbrook Farms, and then the West Jordan Hills Villages. Wanted you to see what Herriman looks like. These are all numbers that come from the construction database that used to be known as the Bureau of Business and Economic Research at the University of Utah. Now it's the Kem Gardner Public Policy. So table 1 is right off of their data. Guess who's number 1? and number one by a substantial amount. So if you just look at the numbers in Salt Lake County, you're doing 22% of the dwelling units. These are from January through August of 2018. This is just so far this year. You're way ahead of South Jordan, you're way ahead of Draper, and then you can go on down. Now, because of the availability of the size of the screen here, I dropped some of the lower ones. So you see Midvale, and then you get a total of other Salt Lake County. This looks then at this number of single-family units, and I think you probably have to assume these are what we would also call single-family detached, but their title doesn't include that. South Jordan, and then here you are, number 2. And so this then looks at the percentage of the single-family units of your total. So you're ahead of West Jordan, Draper, dropping on down even to West Valley. So then we look then at the multifamily condos and total dwelling units, and then you can see that the table dropped the O on condo on the third column, but you're the highest percentage then of multifamily condo townhomes.
These are permitted in basically the first 2/3 of the year. Is that what you're saying? Sorry.
I'm sorry?
So that's what we permitted
This is what you permitted.
between January and August of this year.
And I'm not sure. Coming back to the first table, if you look at the number of work days between January and August, and then you looked at the total number of Herriman building permits, so your building department processed 7 dwelling unit per day.
According to the developers up on Capitol Hill, that's not fast enough. They want to change the rules.
We looked at that number and said, oh, wait a minute. We don't see lines of people out in front of your building department like you see in some of other communities. You've got a good staff, for one thing, but they're also processing multiple at one time. These aren't a bunch of single-family, single-owner coming in on permits. You're dealing with large, sophisticated developers that are doing big projects. Now, again, coming back, we meet weekly with the study committee. Gordon's been fabulous. Michael's been terrific. Bryn, we couldn't live without Bryn. Blake's been great. Justin's been great. I'm Bob Springmeyer. I probably should introduce myself when we started. Tom Burdette, right here, former development director in West Jordan, and then Jim Taylor. If you liked some of his developments, Jim's first-class guy. So appreciate the opportunity to work with you. Things are coming along very nicely. We'll have our report ready for you shortly, and happy to try and answer any questions.
I think your numbers on your graphs there show exactly what we have known all along.
You sensed all along.
Yeah. It sensed all along, and that is that obviously we know we're experiencing rapid growth out here, and we know that obviously density has been part of the conversation for a long time out here, and we know that we have a higher number of those multifamily units that are coming out here, and we know that we're doing our part as far as permitting those in conjunction with the story that's, I guess, trying to be told amongst the rest of the county, and that is that potentially we need more of those. And so I appreciate the validation there of the data that you've been able to present to us tonight, and being able to help us continue to educate ourselves and our residents that we're aware of it. We are doing our part, but we're trying to do it, address those issues where we have that smart, responsible growth that goes along with it. I think another point to make there, that just for clarification purposes, when we talked about permitted numbers from January to August, that means, even though it was clarified in the slide there, permitted doesn't mean permitted by this body. That means number of actual building permits that were taken out from previous approvals of these developments in there. So I don't want anyone to get scared and think that we allowed a whole bunch of new multifamily in the first. Those were projects that have been approved some for several years that are now getting around to that development phase and taking out those building permits. But good data for us to continue to build on as we look at the other potential development associated with it, not only outside of our city, but within our city, and those associated with potential annexations as we look forward. So thank you very much.
I do have a question for you. Can you tell us of all multifamily units in the county that were permitted during that time? Can you tell us what percentage of those came directly from Herriman? So that's what this is here. So
the total multifamily condo townhome units during that same period in all of Salt Lake County was 3,425.
okay, so so that's what this graph is showing, saying that 14% roughly of the entire valley's multifamily units were built in
Yeah,
Herriman.
what this does not pick up is Lehigh and your neighbors to the south.
So,
And obviously, I dropped, just because of the limitations on the side of the screen, I had to drop Alta and
that's fine. I think the telling number is that basically a city of 50,000, we took 15 or 14% of the multifamily permits came out of Herriman. And I think that's once again very telling.
I happen to live in Salt Lake. I can tell you how many cranes there are in Salt Lake.
Bob,
I mean,
go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
Will your study, though, not necessarily on the screen, but will your study pick up our neighbors to the south, Eagle Mountain, Saratoga, because they are so like us?
Yes, yes. And as you could see with Lehigh Holbrook down here, if you ever get a chance, I mean, we would love to organize a field trip to come to look at some of these developments. So you get a better feel for who they are, what they're offering, and frankly, what people are buying. And if you express any interest, we'd love to do a Saturday morning or, some kind of thing and do a field trip and take a look at some of these.
I think that's an excellent idea, and I think it's telling that of these developments that you've called out that are in fact selling, that do have product that people are wanting to go into, all of these that you listed are half the density of the proposed Olympia Hills. So I think that's also telling to those that are trying to push this high of density, if they were even in the neighborhood, but double the density of other similar type communities that are doing their part to have growth. So I think it's irresponsible for anybody to look at double the density and think that it's not going to create pandemonium, and frankly is unfair. So I mean, that was just to me a startling, just again note that we're to bear double the density of any like community.
You all in the study session had an amazing discussion that we sat in. We actually we were there to see the new Rio Tinto representative. But the best part of being there was listening to your conversations on traffic and light rail and all the things you've already been doing. Quite frankly, you paralleled conversations that we're having. And if you're going to have density, you have to have transportation that's appropriate for that kind of density. And, when we started this project, Gordon in his wisdom said, you mentioned it, Mayor, the southwest part of the valley has been severely criticized for not having density. Well, okay, state, criticize us. but better step up with some money. You know, the state's responsible for transportation. It isn't you. The county doesn't really do much at all in transportation. UTA has responsibilities. Wasatch Front Regional Council has responsibilities. You mentioned, Mayor, the grant program Wasatch Front Regional Council is offering to help with transportation. I would strongly recommend that you individually, not necessarily part of Envision Utah or anybody else, put in your letter the end of this month, before the end of this month, saying you intend to apply for some of that money.
And I believe Michael stated in the meeting today that we have already done that. So we fully intend to go after those
Good.
funds as well.
Good, because you paralleled our conversations. And if we were just tickled to death, you're ahead of us on that. So I was worried we were going to have to do a final report before we could have that conversation. So well done. Thank you.
I just have one additional comment to what you brought up, Nicole, as far as that density. It's double the density. And what people will see is not the 9-point-something units. They'll see much higher than that because, like you said, it doesn't take out roads or anything like that. And I drive by Lehigh Holbrook Farms very often. And where it is it's all on Camp Williams, so a good access point there. And there's a road that ties it right over into I-15. There's major transportation corridors around that. Olympia Hills has none of that. But again, double the density.
Well, and we got to, I don't want to sound like I'm lecturing, but we've also got to be really careful on density. What the numbers here are gross densities. And that's been kind of the common way density's been looked at in not only just Herriman, but this whole part of the valley where you're dealing with large developments. Most people living in a neighborhood, if you're talking about 6 units per acre, they then think, well, you're going to squeeze 6 houses onto my block. It isn't the same.
Right.
And so we've got to be careful. Gordon admonished us to stay with gross because that's what you're accustomed to dealing with, and that's what everybody's. But we've got to remember that most of the residents are going to have a hard time with that because they don't understand that that also includes open space and parks and schools and roads and, yeah.
So they're going to see more like 8 to 10 units on that block as opposed to 6.
Yep.
A lot more than that.
So, again, thank you.
So I don't have any questions. I'll have a lot of questions when you get it all done. Just a few comments, largely the ones that I made earlier, your last presentation, so I won't reiterate them. But just one thing to just stick with me. I keep hearing this thrown out there from mainly builders and developers is you need to see what people are buying. Well, I'll tell you as a certified financial planner and meeting with individuals and going through these decisions with them, people buy what's available. I sit down with brand new homeowners every single week, almost every single day, and they're happy to be in that home, but it's not what they want. It's not. It's what's available. It's what the product that's being allowed to be built, and that's what's available for them. So it's not what people necessarily want. It's what's being sold. It's what's available for them to buy. It's just my.
I agree. But there's an affordability factor there that can't be denied.
We can open up the whole economic
I know,
discussion if you
I'm
want.
just
I'll
saying,
go
we
there.
can't not say there's an
So, let's
affordability
go.
element.
Well, thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. We appreciate your report. All right, I will accept a motion on the consent agenda.
A motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Jared?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Nicole?
Yes.
And I will vote yes, that motion passes. Item 6.1, discussion and consideration of an ordinance declaring approximately 0.485 acres of real property located at or near 4900 West, 126 South as surplus, determining a trade for approximately 4 acres of real property located at or near 5200 West and 2200 South, constitutes a minimum bid and consummating the trade. Yeah. The trade constituents the highest and best economic return to the city. Jonathan? please. That was a mouthful.
Thank you, Council. The city engineer, Blake Thomas, he's out on a conference this week, and so he's asked that I step in and present this. My understanding that Council's seen this before, at least they've discussed this before, so I'll keep this succinct. There is a parcel of land that was dedicated to Herriman City from UDOT back in 2012 that resides on the northwest corner of Mountain View Corridor and Herriman Boulevard.
Do you by chance have a map of that location?
I do.
Presentation?
Alan, would you mind? What's that? Is it me? Oh, see? Nope, that's not the right direction.
There you go.
There we go.
It's 126 South and Mountain View right there. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm new here.
You can't go with that.
I can't use that anymore.
You
All right.
cannot use that.
Okay, so this was dedicated, and what we are proposing is we consider this property as surplus, as it doesn't have any use for, within the public right-of-way, that is. So, and then the anticipated proposal is that it is swapped for approximately 4 acres along the Main Street connector. Take any questions you have.
Do you have a picture of that particular piece of land that we're swapping for?
I do not. But it is along, it's a portion along there. It's not necessarily identified exactly where that's at, but it's approximately 4 acres along that right of way.
We won't hold that against you, it's Blake's fault.
What's that?
We won't hold that against you, it's Blake's fault.
But we're getting a much substantially larger piece of land.
Yeah, approximately, yeah.
So what,
4
8, 9 times?
8 times, yep.
8 times the size of what we're giving up.
That's correct.
To me, seems like a fair trade. Any questions?
Nope.
I'll take a motion.
Thank you.
Say for the public, we've discussed this at length, but I think it's pretty easy. I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 2018-34, declaring approximately .485 acres of real property located at or near 4900 West, 12600 South as surplus, determining that a trade for approximately 4 acres of real property located at or near 5200 West, 12200 South constitutes a minimum bid, and consummating the trade constitutes the highest and best economic return to the city.
Second.
You said that way better than I did. All right, Sherry.
Yes.
Clint.
Yes.
Nicole.
Yes.
Jared.
Yes.
I will vote yes. That motion passes. Right, we've got item 6.2, discussion and consideration of a resolution approving the execution and delivery of an annexation agreement related to the Kennecott, Utah Copper LLC annexation and related matters. Gordon Haight.
Thank you. We've been talking over the last several meetings about this annexation of property at Kennecott, and so John is passing out. In your packet, you had a development agreement that we put in there. There's a few changes that we are recommending, and we want to kind of go through those tonight so you understand what they are and give us any questions. Alan, can we put the, well, I guess it's, oh. Okay, it's going to show up on the screen what the annexation plat would look like, so I wanted to have that up for you. So let me go through, let me have John go through a couple of the changes, and then I'll comment if I feel like I need to say something.
So what you have in front of you is the the annexation agreement, and the changes have been highlighted in blue, and they have been specifically requested by Kennecott, so I can go through those with you. And then as late as about an hour and a half ago, we have some more requests from Kennecott, and we'll articulate those to you and identify a process to deal with those. So the first thing is to, in recital A, is to add a map. So that's going to be the annexation plat map, which we'll show here in a minute. Yeah, that's it. Smaller picture of it. Paragraph 3, we inserted the TM zone. That's that technology and manufacturing zone. Kennecott has specifically requested that we add at the bottom that we agree to engage in land use planning process, respect to the property. As a result of this annexation, there's only going to be about, if in fact it's all developed out as we anticipated with manufacturers, there's going to be about 8 acres left. So they want to engage in some discussion. There's no commitments, it's just an engagement, we'll talk. 4, if you look at the plat map, there's up to the top on the north side, there's a thing that says Kennecott, Utah Copper, 2526-400-004. That is a construction trailer, construction yard that Kennecott uses for daybreak. And they wanted to make sure that that was a lawful use. It's currently in our city. So we're basically saying, yeah, it's a non-conforming use. Paragraph 5, we removed the requirement for the road. So we don't have to build the road. What our commitment is that we will build the water line to serve zones 3 and 4. And then in paragraph 6.
Sorry, John, could you point out specifically where zones 3 and 4, this map has shrunk so much?
Okay, so look at like page, well, I don't know where zone 3 and 4.
Are they, my question is gonna be, do zones 3 and 4 encompass more than the area being annexed?
Yes.
Then we need to change that.
Well, let me explain that though on this. I met with Justin today. Over there. And we discussed that. It's more economical for us to just run the line 4 and put a PRV, pressure reducing station valve, for this property, because the zone 4 is a cheaper option for us to bring the water to the site. So we went through that in great detail.
By having it in here, does it obligate us to provide it for another piece of property we haven't committed to?
Say that again.
By putting it in this agreement, does it commit us to providing water to subsequent properties that aren't in this agreement?
We will only be able to provide water to properties that are within the city limits. And so John's going to address that a little bit more in detail, but yes. So nobody else could get water out of this line unless they're physically within the city boundaries of the city.
Are you concerned about Olympia Hills?
I'm concerned about this changing so dang much and the way in which it's been done. I'll save those comments for later.
Okay, so just to make sure I'm clear on the conversation is the water line that we're bringing is a zone 4, and any zone line can service a lower pressure zone, not a higher pressure zone. So that's maybe that answers the question.
Maybe as an additional comment, right now our ordinances do not allow us to provide water to properties outside the city. So they have to be in the city to get water. Then paragraph 6, a non-binding collaboration to plan about 800 more acres that Kennecott has in this area. And of course, it's non-binding. Now, and then we made 2 more changes. The city manager is going to get notice, and then Jeff Stephenson, who is here from Kennecott Copper, is going to get notice. Those are the changes that we have made that are here. Now, there are 3 or 4 other changes.
Sorry, before we move on, I mean,
Okay.
one thing that we're noticing is the one thing that is sticking out here is residential over and over and over specifically. I mean, this is a non-binding collaborative land use planning process for additional real property owned by the owners annexed in the city. Of course, we would engage in a discussion of what it's going to be used for, but to call out such planning shall include specifically residential uses.
So
What are we doing here?
So what we're talking about, the city has been pretty clear that what we're interested in is getting commercial property. That's what we want with the annexation. That's a big deal to us.
We thought we had willing partners all the way around, starting at 276 acres.
Right. The Kennecott is looking at their full 1,000 acres, and their concern is they wanted to make it clear that despite the city pushing this, that they wanted to also include in their planning process residential elements. And so this doesn't bind anything more than just doing a planning process. It doesn't bind an annexation or any potential future zoning or what we end up doing. But what it does say is that despite my early pressuring for them to do just commercial, they want to let us make sure that that communication is clear, that they want us to be able to look at residential in the future as we plan their area.
Good response. I would be much more comfortable if this read including but not limited to several different uses.
And my comment,
I think he's okay with that language, including but not, he just gave me the head shake.
okay, like you say, my comment was going to be, as we talk about in the spirit of non-binding collaborative land use planning.
We want to look at one
If we're
theme.
going to call out one specific type, we should call them all out rather than just leaving it general. Because if we leave it general, then it, of course, it can encompass all types, but I think it's a,
And the public has watched this despite, I mean, we've actually told them up to this point, up to the last meeting 2 weeks ago, which we were both unable to attend and have watched online, and my phone blew up the next day. The public is watching this, and they're seeing what this looks like. It looks like they're not interested in a collaborative planning process. They're interested in more apartments is what they're interested in.
Well, I would.
Just calling it out.
So I just want to take a step back just for a second and just lay the foundation of first just appreciation for Kennecott's willingness to work with us and be good neighbors with us. We've had a long-standing relationship with Kennecott. I am pleased that it calls out a collaborative process. I think all of us are on the heels of seeing what happens when there is not, in fact, a collaborative process, and the hullabaloo, to throw out a word, that happened with Olympia Hills. So,
could you spell that, please?
yes, for the record, hullabaloo. But, you know, I think that Kennecott is having discussions with us, is appreciative. I think that we've had a good relationship. We want to continue to foster a relationship. And as such, that we can have critical conversations that we are at present having. And so I'm supportive of the changes that you've said, but I want to start the discussion with just appreciation that we are in fact having the discussion, because those are acreage that has a direct impact on our residents, and being able to partner and have those conversations could bring in some really fantastic land uses that are really a win for all of us in the Southwest Valley.
Good job. You have to reel me back in a little bit later, too.
There we go. Let's all play nice. Let's all play nice.
Okay, so as late as within the last few hours, we've had some more potential changes to this agreement, so let me identify them to you. They're concepts, we haven't drafted them yet. The first one is no changes to the zoning, this TM zone, unless the parties agree.
What section are you,
Oh,
So number 3.
this is new.
So
New,
the city
okay.
cannot change our own zoning ordinance unless both parties agree?
Zoning the property.
Property,
Right.
okay.
These are changes that we've talked about that are not in this agreement, but concepts, if you're acceptable, we have a proposal to deal with those.
So you're speaking to establishing the zoning as part of the annexation?
Yes.
So let me just explain what he's saying. So the concept is, it's not in this agreement, we'd like to add, is that neither party, or that the city can't change the TM zone to something else without first getting permission from Kennecott. Can you agree to that?
But that's only
On
as
this
part of-
property, not the
that's
zone itself.
On this annexation. we
Just only
cannot
this
change the
property
zone.
on this annexation.
On this annexation.
Because once that's set and the property is officially annexed, then of course that discussion
The city
changes.
has the ability, if it chooses, to file a petition on a property owner's property to change the zone. They're asking us to include in this annexation that we will not change from the TM zone to another zone without their permission.
Okay.
so would that be a zoning condition that we'd place on the particular piece of property?
No, we would
Just be
put,
part of
we,
the
so I would
agreement.
Just
put
be
a
part of
line in
this.
here basically saying that the city will not change the zone from the TM zone without first getting their permission.
I don't really
Where's
see
that verbiage, John?
It's not.
It's not in here.
These are things that we,
So let me finish what we're saying here. So these are things I think are good for both of us. And this is some stuff that I don't think there's any intent or interest in our city to change from the TM zone any of the property annexed in. So I think I believe I intimated that the council would probably be good with that.
I think we just need to make sure that it specifies on this property.
Yeah, just
and
this
that-
annexation.
Because, I mean, the way it was worded implies that we can't change the zone at all,
No.
No,
So.
I agree.
which is
So
larger
what
than
we'll
the
ask for
property
the
itself,
clarification.
right?
So what we'd be saying, to make sure it's clear, is that on this property that we're annexing, we would not change the zone without the permission of the property owner.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll go through these real quick.
Or can it be?
Why won't you stand there?
I don't know. Should that be a two-way street, that it can't be
Yeah.
changed without
Well,
both of us
we
agreeing?
have to get permission if we change the zone because you're the board that
We're
has
the
to vote
board
on
that
it.
does that, so
So it's
automatically. we have to
implied
get
that you're already in
permission.
charge of that.
Yes, we are.
So it just keeps you from doing that because you own that card.
All right.
The second one is this, and this is, I think, a good, again, for both parties. If the sale to Riverbend Development, who's doing this project, falls through, then two things happen. One is, we're no longer obligated to build the water line, which is good. Second, we'll agree to allow this, I'll let John word this, I'm gonna say it the way I want, and then he's gonna say it the way it should be said. That the city will allow this annexation to annex back out of the city.
De-annex.
So it's
we
just like nothing
de-annex
happened.
if it all goes away.
So here's the deal. In this agreement, we have to put in a water line. If there's nobody that's going to, that's not as much fun. It's much funner if it's going to somebody and it's going to be going somewhere. This annexation and the water line are to service this project coming in. Kennecott is much more interested in having this property as part of the full master plan that we talked about in the earlier section. And so they would take the obligation from us of having to build a water line off, so we no longer have that obligation. And they would no longer, then this property, the 38 acres, would disconnect out of the city, and we would allow that to be part of the full discussion of the, I'll let you decide if you like that or not, but I wanted to see if you have questions about the concept.
Let's back up to the actual wording. If what doesn't happen?
If the sale of the property
Just the sale of the property.
to
We don't have the exact wording yet. These are concepts. So
This is
about,
really important to get this part right.
yep.
So I want to make sure you understand the concept.
No, and I do have a question on the concept. To me, we are agreeing to a use.
Right.
Which is a TM use. So I'm fine with the first one. I'm less comfortable with the pulling back of the annexation, when in fact, I feel like we're agreeing to a use, not necessarily a tenant on the use. So if right at this moment when we sign, we feel like that is a good and the best and highest use for that particular annexation, why does it matter that it's Company X or Company X chooses to go to another location and Company Y comes in? Equal use. So I feel like this agreement is agreeing to a use. I'm less comfortable agreeing to a tenant that could be fickle and frankly shopping around.
I'm more skeptical of, my follow-up question is going to be, okay, well, what agreement's in place for the sale of this property? Is
that's
this
the
something that
next
can,
obvious
is this something
question,
that the property owner intends to back out on?
Well, okay, let me make some things really clear. The property owner, Kennecott, could, if they intended to kill this deal, cancel, had protested or withdrawn their application for annexation. So we've passed that point. They're committed to annex, but they've also made it clear they're annexing for this user, the user. And this user is being developed by Riverbend Development. And so what they're saying is, if this user doesn't come, they would like to have
Apartments.
they would like to have this 36 acres as part of the full master planning process. And if it does come through the process that this use should be here, then they're comfortable putting this use back there and then waiting for another user to come in and get that. But what they have expressed their concern about is that this use is preceding the big master plan that they'd like to go through. That's their concern, is that we're pushing this use forward quickly. And I want to back up a little bit.
So, Gordon, really quick, back to Jared's question. Currently, the property is under contract. There's a scheduled closing on that. can, which I'm guessing the answer is yes, can Kennecott pull out of that agreement right now to close on that property, which then forces this clause within the,
Which really gets around the annexation issue.
So here's what
Correct.
happened. At any point in this process, Kennecott can not go through with the sale. So they have that ability. They also have the ability to withdraw the annexation. But here's the deal. The closing for this property is after January 1st because the property owner needs to be in the city to get the building permit and to get everything in place. So the property, by the time, there's three people that can kill this deal. The end user, they can pull out and do something different. I believe they won't. The city, of course, we cannot build a water line and certainly and not issue a building permit and stop the deal. So we have the complete ability to kill this deal. I hate that word. We can terminate the deal. Or Kennecott has the ability at this point to withdraw the annexation or not go through with the sale to the property. So in any of those scenarios, all three of us hold a card that can stop this deal. All three of us are in a very quick freight train to try to make this work for the end user. The end user has some extremely tight deadlines to make this happen.
I think the concern, at least on my part, is that, as you described, we each hold a card that could terminate the deal. But what I'm hearing is there's really only one of those three that has a desire or maybe a concern of this proceeding forward that would be the only one to possibly play that card.
Yeah,
And inserting that language into an agreement, I'm not going to say incentivizes, but it gives them.
It sure makes it sound like that's the intent.
It does.
And so I agree. They could kill this deal before we even agree to this thing. And so by them, if they don't agree to this contract, it kills the deal. And then the annexation disappears anyway. And so what we're suggesting is they have shown forth the fact that they are working with the end user to get the property done, that it would be shocking to me had they put this much effort into it just to wait a few more weeks and then kill the deal. I think if they had any intention at all of killing the deal, they would have done it earlier when they could have spent far less time doing it and not come
I'm
to all
not
these
going to
meetings.
disagree with that, but at the same time, we have continually whittled down the size of this annexation to something really far less tenable to I think, to this body and what the desire was going into this for other reasons. And so even though they're still in the game and that's appreciated, every other indication has been that they're working in that direction because, again, we went from 275 to 75 to 58. Now we're down to 38. And and especially when we start to talk about in terms of, I get that wanting to if this doesn't go through, wanting to master plan the entire acreage together, and there's certainly logic and things that make sense in that. But again, when you're talking 38 acres in relation to 1,600 acres, I guess my question is why is it such a big deal to try and insert that this 38 acres, once it's zoned and annexed, that would be pulled out as part of that planning? Because it, again, 275 acres, I can see that. That makes a little bit more sense to me that there's more concern there. But again, we've just had so much continual motion and change on this that it causes me pause, and it makes me really want to vet this out very clearly to make sure that those intentions are known.
And really these discussions, it's not like these discussions have been going on for a few weeks. This has been several months. Yeah, it's a faster paced process than a lot of other developments that we've seen. But early on, it could have been this discussion. 275 was fine until 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
And 74 was fine until today. And then it was 58. Now, we're at that this is the problem we're having. Is it the sudden change of heart and about face? I mean, 2 weeks ago, the comment was made by their representative, we want to see balance of a third, a third, a third. Well, we're way less than a third now. I mean, the public is watching this.
Yeah.
They are paying attention to what people's true intentions are.
So I want to make it really clear. If we go through a robust planning and this area is deemed good for this particular zone, or if we go through a robust planning process and it's better for some other kind of use, I think, okay, let me backtrack. So let's say we don't annex this property and it stays in the county under the current zone, under their ownership. Then we go through a robust planning process. Whatever use comes out of there, we're all going to have agreed to whatever that use ends up being, because that's what we want to do, is see the process develop what that is. Kennecott is saying we haven't had that opportunity because of the timeline of the end user. We are rushing this thing through, and this gives us an opportunity, the city, the opportunity to get some of this badly needed job creation that we're clamoring for. So they have agreed to this much reduced, and I'd prefer, I told them I'd like the whole 1,000 acres to be used. But they have agreed to let this 38 acres, and I want to be extremely clear on this, it could not be any less. The reason it's that much is because we had to pick up additional property so that there wasn't a gap between the existing city limit lines and the Bullfrog. There's some property. I didn't mean that. I meant jetpack. Who's the editor?
So talk about this. I have a very specific question. Is there any legal precedence for this? Has the city ever allowed an annexation to de-annex in a clause like this? Does state law allow this? I mean, I have some real concerns about that.
Next to the 1,000 acres, how could the 38 matter that much to the grand plan?
There is a process to de-annex, and Sorensen went through that with Bluffdale. Bluffdale objected, hence there was a fight. So the concept is the city, if this property is not consummated, the sale does not go through with Riverbend, then it's undone. And the way you undo it is they petition, they request a de-annexation, and we've agreed not to object.
But what I'm hearing from you, and this perhaps alters my opinion on this, what I'm hearing is that Kennecott is trying to facilitate our ability to place this user here, hence the reason that they are moving this forward on a quickened pace. So in that regard, a thank you is in order, because this is an opportunity that's on our doorstep. Kennecott is moving quickly to make that possible. So that's, I appreciate that. I still feel like you can agree to a use over a user.
Thank you, Scouts, for coming out. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Scouts. I still think you could agree to a use rather than a user. That being said, that they are trying to help us accomplish landing this particular user with job creation, and then again, in agreement, the best developments are ones that have an empty canvas. And so if in fact we can engage in a good two-way discussion about planning this entire area, all the better. I think the hodgepodge way is frankly the wrong way to do this. I mean, the benefit we have out here in the West is land. So, again, if they're trying to help us and that is the true intent here, then it's appreciated, but would definitely hope that there is an interest, a genuine interest to have that discussion for mass planning of all of this.
And I believe it is. They've given us every indication and want that in the agreement that we are ready to start doing a very thorough vetting of the property, that we all get to a really great solution. We have a great project. So I think, so do you want us to?
So I have a question, and I agree with the hodgepodge, but it feels like that there could have been some accommodation in this annexation agreement. First of all, the owner petitioned annexation from Herriman.
Right.
And so they came to us asking to annex
I
in.
think there was some
Some mutual, right?
Let me
Yeah.
characterize it the way I probably should need to, is we had worked with this user, and I put him in a small room and made him sign the annexation paper.
You beat him up?
Yeah, I think it was more us
Okay,
pushing.
well, that's
agreed to
okay,
it
but
at our
however.
But they did sign
it was
under
agreed to,
duress.
and I think that you could have done the same nice blank canvas on with,
I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that since we are on the public record. They were not under duress, correct?
We're not under duress.
Okay, I just want to make that very clear that
More sarcasm.
we didn't force anybody to do anything. Now, we appreciate their willingness when they saw that it was very important to us to
That's
work
probably more
forward.
characteristically
But
accurate.
we are on the public record. I want to make it very clear
We didn't do duress.
that we didn't do anything
I
inappropriate.
I think
guess-
Councilwoman Orr's point is that they're willing participants.
I guess I just, yeah, and I guess I just don't understand why we need to whittle it down so much. This is almost about 10% of the original proposed annexation, because it still could be somewhat of a blank canvas. We can still work together with all these, engage in land use planning processes on that 300 and still bring all of that original, what was it, 270, what was the original? 275, and still carve out this one as a TM zone and still bring the rest of it in, and with ongoing conversations and negotiations to do a proper planning process and bring it in phases. I guess I'm just confused why it all of a sudden has to be whittled down to such a tiny amount.
So what I think happened is when we sat down originally several weeks ago with Jeff and Kennecott and the end user, the intent, we all talked about the annexation. In my mind, I had clearly what it meant. They had clearly their mind what it was. And I think that has been, it's always communication. And I think that has been part of the issue, is they had a different idea than what was in my mind. They should have read my mind and done it the way I said or thought.
So let me just take us all a step back here. So we've talked about, because we got way off on the side in this particular night, and I think it's important that we have this discussion. Are those the only two concepts, or is there
No,
another
we're
concept
going
we
through
need to
a
talk
couple
about?
more.
Can I make just one comment before we move off of this one to the next one? And two quick points to that. I agree with your points, Gordon, about the planning process, and that if everyone agrees that that's the best use, that would be been deemed back on that piece of property. The difference in that is that if it's outside of the city limits, we can agree with them all day long, but unless at some point there's a plan for that to be annexed into the city, there's no value to us. Our opinion doesn't matter at that point. So I definitely agree in a robust conversation and a planning process. Again, if there's at least an expression or a desire or an intent that at the end of that robust planning process, that there's going to be something beneficial to the city to do so. So in that same vein, in terms of requesting that if this particular user, to Nicole's point, we're zoning for a type of use, not a particular user, then possibly we could look at that if it doesn't go through with this user, there at least is some time frame in there before it's automatically, we agree to a de-annexation for us to, again, pursue others. It doesn't have to be a long time frame, but at least a time frame possibly. Again, this is in the spirit of collaboration and work, that possibly there is another tenant that this site would work for if this particular one doesn't go through. Just a concept
That's a
to throw
thought.
out there.
I would really like to get through all of it, and then we can come back to any of the future discussion, because it sounds like we're going to have a few more things that we want to go. So if you could read off or just start to go through it, then we can discuss those as we come back.
Okay.
I'd appreciate that.
All right. So the next concept is that we spell out in the agreement that there's no open space requirement for this zone. Now, again, there's landscape but no open space. We don't.
Or the
zone, or for the annexation for the
annexation
zone.
area.
We're not going to extract. And we have no ordinances or vehicles to do that. And so basically we're agreeing to do something we already don't do. And we would intend not to do it.
That's fine.
Okay.
Oh, and then the last concept is that this agreement does not obligate Kennecott from annexing more land to the city.
To annegate or from? There is no
Yeah. But I want to speak more to this, to Clint and Nicole's comment. So they asked, what is the benefit of going through this master planning process? And I'll tell you what I think it is. I think it's we go through this process and we get a great plan, and they agree to annex the full 1,000 acres to us. So I'm saying the end goal of this planning process, in my mind, and I'll make it real public, is I think we get agreement that you feel good about, they feel good about, the public feels good about, and we annex it. That's the goal. So
I'll
But
just
everything in this agreement, it really sounds to the contrary. I'll be completely honest. Not that I don't agree, I agree with you completely, but the concepts and the things that we're talking about, again, especially even with the last one, is that there's no obligation for future annexation. I agree with you, that is the end goal, but all of these concepts and requests that are come in there really steers us in the opposite direction of that end goal.
and I understand what you're saying, but here's what they suggested and have talked about as a concept is they'd like to reset, step back, and have that planning process, but because of this end user, they're willing to let this accelerate through if this comes about, but they don't want to jeopardize the ability to have that planning process. So there's two ways you could look at it. Clearly, the way you're viewing it, or you could say, and this is exactly through their eyes, we want to have a thorough planning process, and everything in this agreement we're doing takes away from the ability to do a thorough planning process. So this thing could look like it's anti-annexation, or it could look like it's an anti-thorough planning process. Well, both discussions could be looked at, and that's how they're viewing that.
What's hard for us to, I guess, take is that we've entered into this over the last several months in good faith, and everything has been good. Willing participants on all sides, all three parties, until literally the last second, and in a very public way, they're saying they want in writing that we'll agree to something that already exists, which kind of, to Clint's point, almost says that's their intention. I'm fine putting that in the agreement, that it doesn't obligate them to annex anything into Herriman. No one is ever obligated.
And that's
But by putting it in there, and very publicly, that sends a signal to not only us, but to the public what their intentions are. That just looks bad. So that's just a comment to the higher-ups, whoever is looking at this. Some professionals need to go over this next time and think about how this looks.
And that's the only one that gives me heartburn for I'm fine with everything else and the reasoning behind it. And again, my appreciation is out there as we try and get this tenant, and we desperately need job centers. So I am appreciative and willing to work with all of them. Other than the last one, I have a problem with, because this in no way, shape, or form binds them to anything other than the property listed. So it feels unnecessary to me. And not only unnecessary to me, but to Jared's point, it will speak very loudly to the residents. And so if I was to make any request, it would be, I would personally agree to everything. I would prefer if that last one were not on there, because there's no obligation whatsoever.
So with your comment, I believe it's accurate. Here's what I would suggest, is that I believe this document doesn't obligate them, and saying that it doesn't obligate them is a belts and suspenders. It's just reiterating the document itself. It's if it gives them a level of comfort to just say what we believe the document already says.
But from a communication standpoint, you can
We'll
look
bury
at
it
the, you
deep
can
that
look at
nobody
the
can
hole in the donut, or you can look at the donut. Are we not saying that very thing when we say we want to come together as partners and master plan this and look at uses? Again, nothing binding, but we're looking at the donut instead of looking at the whole, which says we have no intention, or not intention, that's the wrong word, we're not obligated to annex. Do you see what I'm saying? We're saying the same thing. We're saying let's work together when we're talking about the donut. We're saying we're not obligated with the annexation, neither binding, but one that gives some collaborative spirit into moving forward that will involve this process.
And I hear what you're saying. You're looking at the communication piece by having that statement more forcefully placed in the document than just the fact of its absence.
We're agreeing to collaborate on land development. We're agreeing to everything else that's in there, And then at the end, we're asked to say, "Oh, by the way, there's no obligation for
I'm
us
okay
to-"
including it in there. It's just a poke in the eye to us and to our
little bit.
residents. And it's
And-
up to them if they want to send that
Yeah,
message.
and
you
for the
know?
record, I've never liked suspenders and belts together anyways.
John does. He's the one that keeps telling me to do that. So when we look at it personally, other than the message that Nicole's bringing up, I think it's a benign request because the document, I believe, doesn't obligate them, but other than the communication element. So I'm not discounting the points or what people are saying to this. So I'm going to go quickly through these points. One more? Yes?
Yes, agreed. Benign perhaps, but I will say, we again have all read the headlines of, the influx of density. So again, I feel like anything that we do, and we can all point to that being poor communication, not on our part, 'cause it's not in our boundaries. That being said, we should have all learned that better communication eases these development processes. So if it's a benign request, then it's equally benign to include it or not include it.
It is, and I will just say this. Because Kennecott is willing to let us go fast to get with this end user, they just don't want to stumble across something that John here in his very clever way may have gotten in there that nobody caught to make them annex into the city. And so
I'm not interested in a deal breaker. I am simply saying that if we're all doing a collaborative approach, we ought to look at the wordsmithing as well. So it's
Okay.
a simple request by me. It's not a deal breaker for me.
John is a wordsmither beyond measure.
Gordon, can you just real quick, the intent of and we're gonna have a lot of people watch this particular discussion, I'm sure, online afterwards. We are talking about Jetpack, which is a company that's coming to look in and bring 800 jobs.
Ultimately build out at 800 jobs.
Build
plus
out
or minus.
800 jobs on this 30 whatever acres
Right.
that we're looking at. So when I look at this and I talk about it, do I have major heartburn on a couple of those requests? Yeah, I do have major heartburn on a couple of those requests. For example, just an option to just agree not to oppose a de-annexation. I'd be a lot more comfortable if we got, I mean, yeah, they are giving, saying that we don't have to build the water infrastructure, but if, is it specifically the water infrastructure that we're talking about? Because we're not talking about the road, because that's been changed.
The water line.
But it would make me a lot more comfortable if they came back and, to say that they're working in good faith, that for them to come back and say, okay, that's fine, we'll want to de-annex, but, we'll give you the first right of refusal for when we choose to annex back into another community. So that way it's clear their intent is to work with us and to master plan and so I'm not saying that that's a deal breaker on this particular piece of property or not, but I have heartburn when we're just saying ad nauseum that, yeah, this particular, landowner developer can basically choose whether or not they stay in our city in a different process than we have really ever allowed. And I don't know of any other cities that have ever had that in particular agreements. That might have, but that causes me some consternation. Do I have problem with the things that we're already doing? I agree with the wordsmithing, but I don't think it's that big of a deal because it's already code and law. But for me, that de-annexation is something that I would like to see some sort of remediation on. Say, look, the intent is not to just pull it out of the city and go somewhere else. The intent is to pull it out of the city, plan it, and bring it back in.
Let me rephrase what this is, because I did not tell it to you correctly. John did a better job, and I talked too much, so we didn't hear what he said. So here's how this would work. If the deal falls through, it doesn't go to automatic disconnect. What it does is it allows Kennecott to file for annexation, and we don't protest it.
De-annexation.
De-annexation. And they could choose to wait 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, or whatever. They have that choice of when they want to pull that out. So it doesn't obligate them or cause this to happen rapidly.
But if they did, it obligates us not to fight it.
So if they, but here's the point I would make. I think it would be valuable to what Nicole said is if this deal didn't go through, that we show them even a better deal so that they want to keep that in the city with another user that would take the site that would be even better for them. So I think they were willing to agree to this group coming in. I think I'm confident in our ability to fill the space before they want to file a disconnection. Kennecott is almost, or probably even a bigger bureaucracy than us, but it may take them a while to want to decide to disconnect it. So there may be a process or timeline. Now, I don't think we put that in the agreement, but I can just tell you it doesn't happen automatically if the sale goes through. I think immediately I'm calling them up saying, hey, can we have some time? And certainly I'll be extremely persuasive.
Let me just ask, is the applicant here, I assume?
Yeah,
The
yes.
applicant's here. I'm getting
I like speaking for him if I can't. No.
That's the thing is, I feel that we have in some ways been having a discussion about somebody's land without having them as part of the discussion and trying to interpret through our city staff. So maybe you can help put some of our fears to rest. Maybe you can help us.
My name is Jeff Stevenson. I'm with Kennecott, Utah Copper. So I get to be the appointed representative on this particular project, and I do appreciate it, and so I do enjoy it for the most part. Sometimes not as much, but for the most part I do. So I'm happy to address a couple of questions, and I think I can tick off a few pretty quick. Okay. Right? So, like, we're happy to stay in the city if you're happy to build the water line. So if you want to keep the water line in, we'll stay regardless of the deal. But if you don't want to build the water line, then we're not as interested in staying in the city, if that makes sense.
And
so
that
it's
makes
kind
a
of
lot of sense,
kind of goes both ways. So if you want to build the water line, if the deal falls through and you still want to build the water line, we're happy to stay in.
So if that was part of this agreement to say,
Yeah.
if we
So-
we would only
so
be able to
it was-
de-annex
It was an opportunity for the city to say, hey, if you don't want to spend $2.4 million building a water line to the middle of nowhere, you don't have to. We'll let you out. If you do, we'll stay in and have a water line.
But like Gordon
So-
said, it's
so-
funner to build a
so-
line that goes to somebody, so.
So if you want to build it, we'll stay in. If you don't want to build it, we can go out. What it does is it gives us a unilateral approach to say, hey, or not unilateral, but it gives Kennecott an option to say, hey, city, do you want to still spend $2.4 million to build a water line to an empty field?
So I think at the same time, again, it cuts both ways. To Clint's point earlier, to Nicole's point earlier, I think that that's an easy way to change, to tweak that, to say within a given time frame. So what we're thinking, what that kind of clause implies is that, say, if the user decides to pull back on the deal, and I'm okay in inserting this language in one of two ways. One, if it stipulates that the sale of the property falls through at, I don't know how, John, help me out, but at no fault of the property owner, right? So if everything else is fine, but if Kennecott's the one who decides, oh, we don't want to sell it at the last minute, right? That's what gives me pause to that clause. That's what opens the door for us. We've done all this work, we have everything in place. Well, if we decide not to sell it at the last second, then we're out of here. Too bad.
Said if there's a water line, he'll stay.
So you're saying.
When that's what I'm keying on, if that's the case, then the clause needs to be different, right? Because it's based on the sale of the property to this specific user, again, to your point.
Versus
the
infrastructure
use.
being in.
So, and if it's a time thing,
Which again gets it back to use.
so if these people want to do it quickly, and that's why you're willing to agree to it, and it can get other things jump-started, then a 12-month period for our sale of the property would make sense, right?
So
Doesn't have to be long,
So-
but a reasonable amount of time that gives us some amount of,
Leverage.
not leverage, but some amount of assurity
Surety,
Sure, that's a better term, yeah.
or insurance.
that this isn't disingenuous, because that's what it feels like. The way it's worded, the way it's been presented. It feels that way, it looks that way. My phone's lighting up right now, just like it did last week after the meeting, or 2 weeks ago after the meeting when I wasn't here. People are watching and they are paying attention to this. It doesn't look right, it doesn't sound right. So if that's genuine, that's your concern is the water line, then that should go with the use of that property. And if it's the time frame, well, a reasonable time frame would make sense, not the particular sale to this particular user on that particular day. So I'm fine with the wording if it's at no fault of the property owner. If somebody else screws up and it doesn't go through, or if it's that it doesn't go through for this period of time. Again, I think it has to be at no fault of the property owner, because it's leaving that open that if we just don't want to do it, we're out of here.
Councilman Henderson, all right, describe what no fault of the property owner would be. Like, there's that, I'm very uncomfortable with that language. I'm much more comfortable with the time frame.
That's why I'm looking to John to come up with the language, because it needs to be something of other than, we just don't want to do it.
So I think the city could decide that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Right.
could.
That's why it's at
Yeah, right. So I think what I would be more comfortable with and what I would propose is something like this that would say, hey, if for whatever reason this transaction doesn't take place, this annexation takes place before the transaction, right? So this annexation takes place effective January 1st. There's no closing before that, right? So the transaction will by necessity happen after the annexation, right? If for whatever reason they don't, and the city decides they don't want to build a water line to an empty field, then the city can say, hey, we don't want to build that water line. And they can say, Kennecott, will you release us from the obligation that this agreement sets forth as to build the water line? And we could have the opportunity to say, yeah, that's okay, that makes sense to us.
And that's why time frame sounds more
So
reasonable.
So I'm okay with a 12-month time frame if you want.
Let me just, let me ask you a question, Jared. If it's worded specifically that they agree to remain in this.
No, we fixed it, the time frame.
From a year.
Okay.
I think that's great.
Now, my understanding though is that this clause is saying that we're only agreeing to not oppose de-annexation if we don't build the water infrastructure. Is that what you're saying? So if we build the water infrastructure, you guys aren't,
Then we're in the city.
then you're in the city.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think this agreement says that you have to build the water infrastructure by a period of time.
Gordon.
Winter. I think winter starts December 21st, 2019.
Yeah, by winter 2019. Yeah.
And winter's a
So
little
the second, I think the second issue that we can tick off really quick is on paragraph 3, right? Where this particular property has been brought up a number of times, is now 38 acres, right? So if we want to exclude specifically the last sentence in paragraph 3, that's fine.
Okay.
Planning includes consideration
Okay.
of residential use.
Okay.
I'd like to
That's great.
We appreciate that. That, in a lot of ways, we appreciate that good faith gesture.
Now, John, do you prefer the removal of that line versus the addition of other uses? Either or?
I'm
Okay.
either or, is fine, yeah.
Well, plus it's a TM zone, which wouldn't have residential uses in it anyway.
It's a question for John. Do you,
Do you have any issues, John, with either adding or subtracting from that? Just take it out. Yeah, take it out. Okay, thank you.
Great.
And you had mentioned in paragraph 6 there, the additional annexes where it makes specific reference to residential uses being maybe open to some language change there as well. Are you still, if we're doing it in one, I think it's consistent to do it in another, or at least reword it so that it's, again, includes other uses or removes, maybe shouldn't.
Well,
shall include-
I think specifically in this case, we want that language in paragraph 6 to stay. We absolutely would want to consider residential uses on the remaining 900 acres.
Can we
And
add?
and we'd want to be very specific, open, and blatant about it.
so the question would be, can we add what we had discussed about all the other uses, rather than calling out specifically residential?
I guess I'm not as concerned with the other uses. I'm pretty sure that those would pass, unless you think that we wouldn't.
It's,
I get your point there.
yeah.
Because this is in respect to the rest of
The rest of
area
it,
that's going to be
versus the
planned.
one.
Versus
But in
the
that area, we still want to change it to multiple uses rather than just residential.
I think residential is our concern that tends to be a hot button issue right now.
If we said such planning shall include but not limited to residential uses,
Residential, commercial, we need to name, not include, not limited to several.
we're happy to
options.
include the residential. I think
We're
just
trying to
looking
help you
say-
message it, because what it looks like for the public that's watching this, talking to us, is that you just want residential. That's what that
Well,
looks like.
I think what we can rest assured with the general public is that we have a big, big, big mine just west of this property. And we're very sensitive to the use of that mine. And we'd like the opportunity to continue to mine there. And it's a multi-billion-dollar operation. And so I think we can be, from our perspective, there's absolutely, we're absolutely very protective of that border. And we want to be able to continue to mine for a very long time. And we don't think that mixing mining and residential uses is great. We don't think that's good for us.
You know,
And so I think I think that mine has been there for 110 years and will continue to be there for a long time. And that is
in my
very
opinion, if
open
we
and
left
blatant.
it as is, I'm not wholly concerned about it. When you read the other additions that are added in this particular clause, so I don't necessarily feel it has to be changed.
Just to clarify, is your point by that last statement just the fact that you believe that there's some natural limiting factors in place as it relates to uses out there, specifically residential, because of the proximity of the mine? Is that an
Exactly.
accurate representation?
Yes.
Did you have any others you want to kind of tick off?
So before we move on from it, just the wording of how it sits just doesn't jive with that, because it says such planning shall include residential uses with respect to such additional real property owned by the owner.
But he's made that very clear. I mean, I think he is trying to be very transparent with your interest in having some
And
residential.
that's fine, but we need to make sure that it considers other things as well.
But keeping in mind, the very first sentence is this is a non-binding collaborative land use planning process. I mean, we're not being bound to anything in here, and I think we need to show a little bit of, I want to show a little bit of faith that the landowner wants to be a good partner, and that I believe that the landowner wants to be a good partner. I think the landowner is trying very hard to protect themselves, just as we are trying very hard right now to protect the city and our residents. So trying to find reasonable ways to show that give and take, I think, is important. And I absolutely understand what you're saying, is that you want that, but none of this is,
So I'll ask the question directly, because I think it helps you in the public realm of public perception. Do you object to adding other uses for that very reason? I mean, such planning shall include several things, including but not limited to residential, commercial, industrial.
That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So, do you have anything else you want to add to us at this point? And we appreciate that you've taken this time to discuss this with us. While he's looking at that, does the council have any other questions for the applicant at this time?
No, mine have been answered.
No, we're just gonna, the 12 months is getting added, right?
Yeah. So if you mind taking a seat
have
for,
any others.
what?
I don't have any others.
Okay, so if you would take a seat for us,
Thanks, Jeff.
Gordon and John, will you step back up here for us?
Jeff.
So voting on something in concept is a hard thing to do. So are we, like, what's the options for us? I mean, do we have wording that we want to specifically use if we're gonna take a motion on this? Or are we gonna take a?
So let me kind of introduce what I think is a solution. Again, the end user is under a very tight time frame, and so the changes to this agreement we've just kind of rattled through to make sure you understand them. This agreement, once we put these things in, need to go to Kennecott's in-house counsel to make sure everything's good. We told them they could use John, but they wanted to use their own people. And so here is a recommendation I'd like you to think about and certainly go over with John, is the changes that you've made that we can write down are pretty easy, straightforward. But I'd like to add the concepts that we talked about, have John put those in, and I'd like you to approve them subject to John saying that we're substantively doing the things that you asked us to do. And if you have the city manager and John look at it, if they're good with that, then let's approve it, and they'll make any recommendations as long as they don't change anything substantively. If they do, we have to bring it back to you for approval, but if they don't, then we can sign it and move on with the annexation.
I want to hear those words come out of our attorney's mouth.
So moved.
Well, we didn't talk to the city manager about this, so I don't know if he's comfortable, if he would like to assign that to the assistant city manager.
So just repeat what was being said so that we can have it on record that that was the advice.
So the process that Gordon is talking about is that you approve it with these concepts in mind, subject to final approval by Kennecott's attorney, your attorney, and either the city manager or the assistant city manager.
And that if it substantially changes from the intent of the council,
It'd come back.
it comes back. Questions, discussion? Good. Who wants to make the motion? Or, and it doesn't have to be to approve, it can be to, what happens if we continue this?
No, I don't think.
Yeah, I
Well,
don't think there's
then
any
there'll be-
need for
Then
that.
there'll be no annexation.
Okay. Yeah, I think I just wanted to be clear.
Where we need to be.
So we've got this needs to be changed, right? 30,
So are we doing just 6.2?
yeah, what's the acreage
Just
on
on
this now?
38.
38.
Well, this 6.2 right now, we're only talking about 6.2, and it doesn't call out the acre.
Right, so this one, we can just, I'll make a motion to approve resolution number R49-2018, approving the execution and delivery of an annexation agreement related to the Kennecott Utah Copper LLC annexation and related matters.
But we need to say with
Need
the
to say.
changes.
With,
These changes, or these additions, conceptually, we'll articulate them more legally, that there's no changing the zoning for this property and this property only from the TM zone without the consent of the parties. And I'm
The Riverbend fall through
yeah, so
water infrastructure.
I'm a little bit hazy on the, so I'm thinking
12
exactly
bucks.
how to articulate the second one. So if the city decides not to build the water line,
I'd say it's just if the sale doesn't occur.
I'd like both in there. Both the water
Or are we
line
talking
and
the 12-month timeline we
Yeah.
agreed to?
Yeah, it's the 12.
well,
Because if there's the sale, we agree to build the line, that's the deal.
Right.
so it's all
The sale
triggered on
doesn't
whether
go
we build the
through.
line or not.
So it's just a matter of,
I would say something to the effect that if the current sale does not go through and no further sales occur for development within a 12-month timeframe
of annexation, 12 months from annexation.
from annexation,
then the property owner could apply for de-annexation and we would not
Then the
protest.
city is absolved of their obligation to build the water line, and the property owner has the right to then de-annex.
Okay, so let me maybe re-articulate this back
Okay.
so we understand. If the current sale is not consummated, or there is no subsequent sale within 12 months for the TM zone, and the city determines not to build the water line, then Kennecott may de-annex and the city will not object.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Does that satisfy you, Steve?
I can, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay? And then the no obligation
For open space.
for annexing additional property. And
I would also add the two.
Oh, and then no open space requirement for this zone.
And then,
I'd also like to add that we've agreed to
Yeah.
strike the language in paragraph 3 where the last sentence, planning includes consideration of the
Right.
residential uses. And then the addition of the additional uses under paragraph 6, that planning shall include but not be limited to residential, commercial, light industrial.
I'll agree to those changes to my motion. And with an additional one, was it paragraph 5, water lines changing from winter of 2019 to a agreed upon date?
yeah, winter's a little vague.
Yeah, what date?
Yeah.
December 31st?
December 31, 2019.
By December
That work?
31st. Okay.
Because that's
All
within
right.
the 12-month timeframe.
So I will second with those changes.
Now, before I call for a vote, Jackie, do you have everything you need for that motion?
She has a good recording.
Got it all right here.
All right. So we have a motion from Jared and a second by Nicole. Clint,
Yes.
Nicole,
Yes.
Jared,
Yes.
Sherry,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. That motion passes. Now, 6.3, which is discussion and consideration of an ordinance annexing territory located at or near 118th South and 7th West, or 11800 South, 7000 West, comprising of approximately 74 acres, what we noticed for 74 acres into Herriman City, commonly known as the Kennecott annexation, establishing zoning for the annexed territory and related matters. Jackie.
So I know that y'all want to talk a little bit more about the annexation. So the process that we went through, all of the noticing's been done. We've had the public hearing. We didn't receive any protests. There were no comments really offered for objecting the annexation. By state code, we do have to approve it and get everything recorded through the Lieutenant Governor's office and the county recorder by October 31st for the annexation to be enacted for the annexation to be in the city January 1st. If it goes on beyond that, then from my understanding, the user doesn't want to do the project that quickly. So we would need to either, well, you can do whatever you want. You can approve it, you can continue it. If you have any questions about the process, I'm happy to answer any questions. However, if you have any technical questions about the annexation, Gordon would love to answer any of those questions.
Is there any discussion by the council regarding this item? I think we've had more than enough discussion up to this point. So I will accept a motion, just noting that we intend to change the acreage from what was noticed from 74 to the new acreage.
I'll make a motion. Motion to approve ordinance number 2018-30, annexing territory located at or near 11800 South and 700 West, comprising of approximately 38 acres, into Herriman City, commonly known as the Kennecott annexation, and establishing zoning for the annexed territory and related matters.
I'll second.
Okay, I believe that was just a quick typo. You said 700 West, you meant 7000 West? 7000 West?
I meant, if I didn't articulate that, then yes, 7,000 West. I thought I had all 3 zeros in there.
Okay. Right, so we have a motion and a second. Nicole?
Yes.
Jared?
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. That motion passes. That was fun. Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it.
Yes.
And I do, one last time, want to express our appreciation to Kennecott for the efforts they've gone through to help us start the development of some of our manufacturing in our community. So thank you very much. It is truly appreciated. So, all right. Our calendar for our meetings coming up is on November 1st. We have a planning commission meeting at 7 p.m. That has been canceled. On November 9th, the city council will meet in a special work meeting, our fall retreat at 9 a.m. Is that going to be here in this building? Tammy, is the retreat here at this building? So we'll be here at City Hall. That is open to the public if the public would like to attend. November 14th, there will be a city council work meeting. It will be the only work meeting in the month of November due to the Thanksgiving holiday. and the city council general meeting will begin at 7 p.m. Keep in mind, we do have the Miss Herriman Scholarship Pageant coming up on November 3rd at 7 p.m. at Herriman High School. We also have the Herriman Senior Social taking place on the 7th at 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Here at City Hall. November 5th, we do have a input meeting for the Herriman Parks, Recreation, Open Space, and Trails Master Plan that we're looking at. That will be at Herriman City Hall at 1 p.m. And we're having another one of those at November 7th at 6 p.m. Here at Herriman City Hall as well. That is the calendar of events that we have coming up. If, at this point, I will accept the motion to close our general meeting and go back into work session.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, staff, for staying.
No, come back in.